We are beginning a brand new series today called Your Best Year Ever. By a show of hands at every location right now, how many of you want 2019 to be your best year ever, right? My hand is up on this. I think all of us do. No one wants to have like a worse year than last year or a subpar year, or we don't want to level down, we want to level up, right? And if you have a desire in 2019 to be stronger, to have your life more successful, to be a person that has a more meaningful life, to be more impacting than previous years, I want you to know this, that's God's desire for your life also. So if you are desiring that this year is stronger, that this year is better, that this year is more impacting, more meaningful, I want you to know that's God's desire for your life also. In fact, it says in Psalms 84 verse 7, it says this, that they go from strength to strength. Now, the psalmist there is writing about people that are followers of God. They go from strength to strength. I actually like how the Passion Translation puts it. They grow stronger and stronger with every step forward. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. That as people who are following God, we believe that we should be step by step getting stronger through 2019. As we move forward, not a step in any direction, but as we move forward, we're gonna believe that God makes our lives stronger and stronger. Stronger in our relationship with Him, stronger in our relationship with others, stronger in our careers, stronger in our health, stronger in our finances, stronger in every area of our lives. So if that is your desire, and I promise you this is the last time I'm gonna go have you clap, all right? If your desire is to be stronger with every step in 2019, at every location, come on, let's give God a huge round of applause, right? Yeah. So this last August, Jen and I were traveling. We actually had gone on a mini vacation with our friends Steve and Charlotte Gamble down on the panhandle of Florida. And we were driving to a small airport in Pensacola to basically fly home on a Saturday. I need to get home to preach on Sunday. And we just had 4 days with our friends and a good time. And we get into the airport, check our bags, do the whole 9 yards, find ourselves in the gate. And the plane arrives, the inbound plane arrived. Everybody gets off the plane, and then it's our turn to get on the plane, but the gate attendant gets on and says the dreaded words, "I'm sorry, but the flight to Chicago is delayed due to a mechanical issue." Now, I personally give a lot of grace at this moment because when I get on a plane, I want it to be mechanically sound, right? You know, I don't want the pilot to be like, well, I know there's something wrong, let's just give it a shot. But instead, I want them to fix it. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And so they start fixing the mechanical issue. About an hour later, the individual gets back on the mic and the attendant says, "I'm sorry, but they're still repairing the mechanical issue, and I'll give you some updates as they come forth." And you know, everybody's kind of okay with it still. We're only about an hour delayed. A lot of young families are in the terminal because, again, I think a lot of them were on vacation, and so you have all these little kids. It was kind of like a big giant daycare. And again, this terminal is really, really small. And so second hour goes by, third hour goes by. The attendant comes back on and says, "I'm sorry, they're still trying to fix the mechanical issue. We're just gonna have to be a little bit longer here in the gate, I'm sorry." And now the tenor begins to shift, right? Because parents, we didn't have our kids there, but parents of small kids, I mean, you're trying to keep them corralled for like 3 hours in the terminal, right? And it starts to get a little bit hairy. Well, about an hour goes by, and the gate attendant gets back on the mic and says, "I'm sorry, they still have not repaired this." And now all of a sudden, it's like pandemonium, right? You hear everybody moan. It's like, ugh. And then she explains the reason why. The reason why is she said this, that on the inbound flight, there was a lady who had gone into the lavatory, into the bathroom, and she locked herself in there, and evidently she has claustrophobia. So once she got in there, and if you've been in an airplane bathroom, they're kind of tight, right? She got in there and kind of freaked out. And even though she could have gotten out, she just freaked out. And so the gate attendant explained that the lady began to tear the bathroom apart, literally. Like she was in there and she's freaking out and she's tearing things off the wall. And it was so bad, the lady said, that the gal that was in the bathroom tore the door off the lavatory. And so here the mechanics are trying to put the door back together. And she had also like taken the smoke detector that is in the bathroom and she shattered the smoke detector in her panic. And so they're trying to figure out how to put the smoke detection system back together on the plane, which is a regulation. If you fly, FAA is not gonna allow you to fly without there being a smoke detection system that's working. And so she said it's gonna be a little bit longer. So we're all like, okay. Another hour goes by after that. Another hour goes by after that. Finally, we are in about the 6th or 7th hour of waiting in the gate. And by this point, it's crazy, all right? And she says, the lady gets back on the mic and she goes, we're having to fly a part in from Houston because evidently the part was damaged, the smoke detector was damaged, and they didn't have an extra one. It was a small airport, so they didn't have it in their inventory. And you could just tell, especially the parents of small children were like freaking out, right? In fact, it was so bad that Jen was actually sitting in the gate and a young boy came up behind her and just grabbed her hair and yanked her hair. I mean, literally. I mean, it was Lord of the Flies. And so everybody's just kind of freaking out. There's this one tiny little bar that's in like the terminal, and the place was packed full of business travelers just being like, give me another one, you know? I mean, it was really crazy. And then finally, we get on the plane after 8 hours. After 8 hours, people have missed connections to Europe. I heard people talking that they've missed their connections to other places. And so it was craziness. It was chaos. There was delays. And we finally get on the plane and travel back home. I started thinking about it, that all of that was created. All of that panic, all of the craziness in the gate area, all the delays, people missing their trip to Europe, all of that was created because of one person's irrational fear. Think about that. Because I realize claustrophobia is a real thing. I don't have it as bad. I have 2 friends that have claustrophobia, Sean and Dan, and when I travel with them, every time we get in a plane, the door would lock and they would be like, we're now trapped in here. And I'm like, I never thought about that before. Now all of a sudden I have claustrophobia. You give me your claustrophobia. So I get it, but at the same time, it's an irrational fear because this lady was in the bathroom. She wasn't trapped in the bathroom. It wasn't like she was in danger. She was not gonna die, but she thought she was going to. And so she freaked out, and because of that, she had created a fictional and inaccurate perception of her reality. And when that happened, chaos and delays and damage and probably a lot of lost money on the airline's part, a lot of that happened because of a fictional and inaccurate perception of reality. And listen, before we point a finger at that person and be like, oh, I can't believe she did that, guess what? We do that kind of stuff all the time. It may not manifest in a claustrophobic kind of way. But so many times in life, we believe something that isn't true about our reality. So many times in life, we perceive inaccurately or in a fictional way what's really going on. And when we do that, we create delays in our life. We create damage in our life. We create chaos in our life. And so I want to talk about how to have the best year ever. And one of the ways that we are going to begin at the very beginning of this year, my first message in 2019, the first time that Hano is formally gathering there at Hananiga at the Performing Arts Center, all of this, I want to talk about how to have an accurate perception of your reality. Because if you're gonna have the best year ever, you need to see your life correctly the way God sees your life and not live by fear or panic or worry or anxiety or any other voice that would create a lie or a fictional perception of what's going on. In fact, I would say this, and maybe you could write this down or log this. Think about this. When 2019, whatever you believe about this upcoming year, you're probably right. Now let me say it again. Whatever you believe about this upcoming year, you're probably right, because our thoughts begin to dictate our actions and create the way we perceive life. So the mind is a very, very, very powerful thing. And that is why the Bible says in Proverbs, it says this, it says, for as he thinketh, now again, this is an old English translation of the Bible. So as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. In other words, whatever you believe about 2019, to a certain degree, is probably gonna be the way it is. Like if you look at it and be like, 2019, it's gonna suck like 2018 did. Well, guess what? It's probably gonna suck like 2018 did. Or you know, if you believe that, it's gonna be hard, or I don't know if financially I'm gonna make it, or I don't know physically if I'm gonna deteriorate or whatever. If you begin to really fixate your thoughts upon a negative kind of outcome, 2019 will be a negative outcome. But on the flip side, if you say, no, 2019 is gonna be a time of faith. I'm gonna believe that God has given me the best year ever. It is going to be a time that I'm gonna be stronger step by step. Every movement forward, I'm gonna become stronger. At that point, I believe God, regardless of your circumstances, is gonna make sure that that comes true. Again, because what we think establishes our faith. Does that make sense? Our thinking, it builds our motives builds our actions build our habits, and our habits form our life. And so what we think up here is important. And so what we're gonna do in 2019 is we are gonna outlaw stinking thinking. Does that sound good? We're gonna outlaw stinking thinking. In fact, I have a question for all of us at every location. What are the thoughts that you're thinking, and are those thoughts true? Are the thoughts that you're thinking true? Well, that's a hard one to answer, right? Because a lot of times we think thoughts and we think they're true. Does a fish know it's wet, right? I mean, how do we know if our thoughts are correct or not? Are we living by fiction or inaccurate perceptions of our reality? Or are we seeing things clearly and truly the way that they are and the way that God sees them? So there was a guy by the name the Apostle Paul. He wrote what we now call the majority of the New Testament, the second half of the Bible. And originally these were letters written to churches. And so that's why when you see a title like Corinthians, it was the letter that Paul wrote, and he was kind of like a spiritual leader, like the leader of the church, that he wrote that to the church in Corinth, all right? And so in 2 Corinthians 10, he's writing this letter and he's instructing the believers there at Corinth this way. He says, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. Now, he's not talking about physical combat here. He's talking about the fact that we are in a spiritual fight. And even if you're here today and you're like going, I don't know about this spiritual stuff. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Is there a devil? Is there not a devil? You know, even if you're kind of questioning that, I would say this, that you probably could admit that some things happen in this world that are just not to be explained through human terms. Like there feels like there's an evil, right? There feels like there's stuff happening. And if there's a God, how is he intervening? And there's something inside of us that says in the Old Testament, in the book of Ecclesiastes, it says that there is a void in our heart that only God can fill. In other words, there's a God-shaped hole. So I think there's a lot of us that would say there probably is a God. And if there is a God, there's probably an enemy. So what is Paul saying here? He's saying this, that when we fight not with weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power. So the weapons we fight with are the ones that have God power, divine power, to demolish strongholds. I'll come back to what that means. We demolish arguments and every pretension. A pretension is where we get the word pretend. Every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. In other words, that there are lies out there that the enemy of our soul wants us to believe, and those lies are set up or in contrast to the truth that God has for you. And so many times, just like that lady that was in that bathroom on that plane, she was perceiving something as reality that was not reality. And we can do the exact same thing in our lives. We can see our finances, our health, our career, our lives, our family, our everything in general, and we can be seeing things inaccurately. And so Paul's saying we have to demolish the arguments, the lies. We got to demolish the pretensions, the things that pretend to be true, that set themselves up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. How many of you would say at every location that it is not a good idea to let your thoughts run rampant, right? I mean, just let them go wherever they want. Thoughts need guardrails. Thoughts need guidance. Because especially in seasons where you're tired or stressed or whatever else, you can be thinking crazy thoughts, right? I mean, you could be thinking things like everything's hopeless, and it's not really hopeless, but you are tired, you're fatigued. We all intuitively know this. And so what Paul is saying is that there are these lies that the enemy or ourselves that we tell ourselves, and if we live by them, that ends up being then chaotic. But rather instead, we need to take captive these thoughts. We need to bring them into alignment with God's truth. Let me put it this way. There is a truth about you that God has, a truth about you that God has that maybe you have yet to realize or discover. That God sees you in such a way in your life. Every single person, even if it's your very first time here at City First, every single person, God sees the truth about who you are and who he wants you to be that we many times have yet to discover because all we're seeing is what's going on in our life. And it's kind of like that old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? So in 2019, we want to see the truth that God has for our lives. We want to, in a sense, demolish every argument and pretension that pretends to be true. And I like this idea of this stronghold. I mean, it's kind of it's a weird word because we don't use the word stronghold a lot. But Paul says that we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ, that we tear down strongholds. What's a stronghold? Well, if you look at the original translation of that word, it was written in Greek originally. But if you look at it, it just means this, it means a fortified place. So let me just put it kind of in our terms, all right? I'm a pretty simple person. It's just kind of where the enemy has set up camp in your head. That's really what it means. And it's that thing you keep tripping over. You know, it's that thing that you feel like you're never gonna conquer. It's that area you feel like you're never gonna get better. It's that place that you feel like you fail all the time. That's kind of like that place the enemy has set up camp, all right? And I like Beth Moore's description. She's a Bible teacher. Beth Moore's description of a stronghold is this: anything that exalts itself in our minds, pretending to be bigger or more powerful than our God. So what in your mind is more powerful than the power of God? Like, do you feel like that addiction is more powerful than God's power? Do you feel like your financial condition right now, like you're wondering how you're gonna make it paycheck to paycheck? Do you feel that's more powerful than God's resource? Do you feel like that maybe the state of your marriage right now and where it's at is not good and it's trending bad in your mind and you're thinking, you know what, this is gonna end in a bad place? Or do you believe that God is powerful enough to turn it around and restore that marriage? You see, we all have areas that we feel like, you know what, this thing, this stronghold, this lie that we bought into, it is more powerful than the Almighty God that created heavens and earth, created you with a purpose, created me with a purpose. So many times we get tripped up thinking that God is weak and whatever this lie is powerful. And today, if you want to have the best year ever, you need to flip-flop that and realize that nothing is more powerful than the God that loves you and is for you. Do you understand that? I don't know what you are up against right now. In fact, we even sang a song about stronger than the mountain in front of us, meaning this, that whatever is in front of you is not stronger than our God. Our God is bigger. Our God is stronger and more powerful. In fact, give that a round of applause. I know some of you want to do that. You know, even in 1 John, the Bible says this. It's written, for the Spirit, and that's a capital S, meaning the Spirit of God, the Spirit in you. Okay, so God in you, for those of you that you're followers of Jesus, you've made him the leader and the forgiver of your life. The Spirit of God is in you, is far stronger. Now look at that verbiage. It isn't kind of stronger, incrementally stronger, a little bit stronger. No, what the Spirit in you is far stronger. Like, I mean, it's not even close, right? The Spirit of God is far stronger than anything in the world. Anything in the world, which means this, that whatever stronghold, lie, belief you believe that is not true, that isn't in line with God's truth about you, whatever that is not as strong as the Spirit of God, which we want to talk about that. How do we get rid of these stinking thinking and these thoughts, you know? You know, strongholds do things in our lives. You may have never thought of it before. You might call it something else. You might call it a mind game. You might call it, you know, something you trip up over. It's a, you know, whatever. But I'll tell you what a stronghold does. It makes you feel controlled. It makes you feel controlled. Like you feel powerless. You feel like it controls you. Like this thought controls you. Like you may feel like I am a failure. You don't even know, as a pastor, how many people, both men and women of age, not just young, not just old, everybody will say to me, I feel like I'm just a failure. I feel like God is just frustrated at me. I'm a failure at my marriage. I'm a failure at raising my kids. I'm a failure at school. I'm a failure. And this stronghold has been lying. It is like the lavatory moment. You're trapped in this false reality that you are a failure. And God doesn't make failures. Do you understand that? Now, we have maybe failed before, but that doesn't become your identity, all right? So the stronghold feels like it controls you. It feels like it traps you. In other words, you can never change. You can never change. Well, I've always had an anger problem, so I'm just gonna always be an angry person. Or my great-grandfather was an alcoholic, my grandfather was an alcoholic, my dad was an alcoholic, so therefore I'm doomed to be an alcoholic. Like these are these moments where we begin to build these thoughts, and the stronghold makes us feel like we can't change. It steals your emotional energy. Strongholds, these lies, it's like it sucks the life out of you. It makes you feel hopeless and tired, depressed, frustrated, angry, whatever. It always leads you to a worst case scenario too, doesn't it? Strongholds do that. You get a diagnosis from the doctor, and immediately your brain goes, I'm gonna die. All right? Or you have a really rough month where, your commission is down, you haven't sold enough, and so the income is down, and you're kind of going, oh my goodness, and you think to yourself, I'm gonna go broke. It always takes you to the worst case scenario, right? Another thing it does is it gives you its identity. Just like I said, with failure, if you feel like you're a failure, over and over again, this lie finally tells you you are a failure. You are dumb, you are stupid, you will never be successful. Sometimes people have spoken those things over you. Can I tell you something? That's the enemy only trying to reinforce that stronghold that is already in your thinking. And so what do? We say the Spirit of God inside of me is stronger than anything in the world. The Spirit of God is stronger. I am not a failure. Oh, I may have failed, but I'm not a failure. And I know right now I'm going through a lean season financially, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be broke. I know that right now the diagnosis was this, but that doesn't mean that it is gonna be fatal. I mean, there's all of this that we have to take captive every thought. Does that make sense? So in the few remaining moments I have with you, I wanna shift gears here, and this is what I wanna do. I wanna say there is a way. There is a way to get rid of the stinking thinking and to be able to bring your thoughts in line with God's truth about you. There's a way to do it, but it's gonna feel weird. And the reason why is Paul says that the weapons or the way we fight is not the way that the world fights. In other words, this isn't like, fisticuffs kind of thing. Instead, it's a spiritual fight, which means you have to use spiritual tools or spiritual weapons. So what we need to do is we have to do the right things first going into 2019. Do the right things first. Today's message is called First Things First. And what I want us to do is I want us to, right from the very beginning, my first message out of the gate in 2019, as a church, even if it's your first time here, I would invite you and encourage you to join us with this. Let's do the right things at the very beginning so that 2019 becomes the best year ever. And it means we have to do some different things. So in Matthew chapter 6, it talks about this. This is Jesus, by the way. He's speaking this. This is his quote. He says, but seek first his kingdom, meaning God's kingdom. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Now, righteousness is a $10 spiritual term. What does that mean? It means right standing with God, okay? So seek first with our efforts. The very first thing we should do is seek God, his way of doing things, and being in right standing with him, and all these other things will be given to you as well. I don't have time to read it, but in the verses before that, Jesus is talking about all the things that give us anxiety, all the things that give us worry. What are we gonna eat tomorrow? What are we gonna do tomorrow? All of these kind of things. He's going over this litany, this list of all of this pressure, all the stuff that creates stress, that makes us not sleep at night. And he says this, he goes, but I'll tell you what I want you to do. Seek first God's way of doing things, his kingdom. And seek first being in right standing, his righteousness. And all of those things that give you anxiety, all those things will be given to you. In other words, all those things will come into line, but you gotta do the first things first. So here's a question. When you come up against a challenge in life, or just maybe in life in general, what do you do first? Especially when you're up against a wall. What do you do first? Do you worry first? Do you work harder first? Do you look at your phone first and Google it to figure out what to do? Do you fear first? Do you get angry first? Do you cuss first? I mean, what do you do first, right? I want to encourage you in 2019 to seek God first. I know, you're like, this sounds too simple, Jer. I know some of you that are maybe even like our guests and you're like, all right, this sounds really scripted. No, listen to me. It is a game changer. Instead of worrying first, fearing first, cussing first, getting angry first, talking to a friend first, instead of that, the very first thing you can do is seek God. And that isn't even in 911 moments. It can be every single day. Because Paul said, the weapons we fight with are not weapons of this world. So I'm gonna give you 2 weapons to fight with as we close. That is gonna help you eliminate the stinking thinking and to help you see God's truth for your life, all right? Paul was basically saying, get rid of the lies, get rid of these strongholds, take captive every thought, but this is what you're gonna have to do, all right? And what you're gonna have to do is this. I'm gonna give them to you, right? Here it is. Number 1, pray, and number 2, fast. You see, I just lost most of you right there, didn't I? You're like, you had me until then. Okay, it feels weird, doesn't it? I mean, come on. Let's just be honest for a moment. Praying, fasting, Jer. I came to church to hear this. Okay, stick with me. The most important thing I'm going to say is in the next 5 minutes and 27 seconds. All right, I want you to dial in here, okay? Because I realize the minute I say pray and fast, you're like, okay. This is the thing. Remember Paul said the weapons are different? So just trying to like self-improve yourself out of the situation you're in will only get you so far. Just trying to work harder at it is only gonna get you so far. It's important, don't get me wrong. But if you really want to be able to see God identify his truth for your life, what he thinks about your life and your future, here are 2 ways to do it. Pray and fast. Now, this is not something that you know, the intensity of it doesn't have to be like huge. I think any step in the right direction, God would be proud of, all right? Listen, if you're gonna fight fear, you gotta have the right weapon. If you're gonna fight lust, you have to have the right weapon. If you're gonna fight self-hate, you have to have the right weapon. If you are gonna fight pride or materialism or laziness or envy or anything that begins to become a stronghold in our life, you have to use the right weapon. In other words, spiritual issues need spiritual solutions. And so, therefore, as your pastor at City First, at all of our locations, I'm gonna lead us to do something in the next 21 days that we've never done before. We're gonna have 21 days that we are calling Pray First. And this is what we wanna do. We want the first thing we do, pray. Not the first thing we do, worry. Instead, pray first. And in that, we're gonna have a season where we're just gonna emphasize prayer and fasting. You're like, well, what is fasting? Well, in the traditional sense, it means that you don't eat food or a portion of food or a certain type of food. There's all types of different fasts. And if you would like to do that, we'd encourage that. But again, do it only if it's medically sound. In fact, consult a physician if you're not sure, okay? But what is a fast? It's clearing space for God to talk. If you want to hear God speak his truth over you, you got to declutter and you need to kind of clear out a lot of the distractions in life. And so, Jesus did it. He spent time, or sometimes he would fast. But it doesn't have to be food. You could fast other things too. So fasting can be like, saying, I'm going to fast social media for 21 days. Now, some of you, the minute I say that, you're like, I might die. No, that's that stronghold talking to you, okay? In fact, I challenge you, try that. Try getting off of Instagram and Facebook for 21 days and see what happens. Maybe for some of you, it's like TV. You're like, you know what? I just am in this rut where I come home and I just turn on the TV and I watch it till I fall asleep. And you're like, I'm in it for 21 days, I'm not gonna do that. Or maybe for you, it's fasting the news. Can I tell you, some of us need to fast the news because you allow Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC to set the tone of your faith rather than God to set the tone of your faith. So guess what? For 21 days, it may actually do you good to fast the news. You're like, what? Yeah, guess what? The problems in the world are gonna be there 21 days later, all right? Maybe for a season, you declutter. You take away the distractions. How about video games for some of us? I challenge you, I dare some of you to do that, all right? Every parent's like, yes, preach it, pastor. All right, so listen, try it. For those of you that maybe, you drink alcohol, you might wanna say, for 21 days, I'm not gonna have wine or beer. I'm just gonna abstain from it. And that's not saying you're an alcoholic. It's just that you're going for 21 days. I want a clear mind. I want a clear heart, a clear soul. All right? So again, I don't know what it is. You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell the person next to you. But think about it. 21 days, prayer and fast. See what happens. Now I promise you this. If you do this for 21 days, we will be hearing the voice of God and more in tune with him than what we are right now. You know why? Because God says so. When we pray, moves the hand of God. When we declutter, take away the distractions, we begin to hear his voice.